Good afternoon, and welcome to the Institute for Government. I'm Jill Rutter, I'm a Programme Director at the Institute for Government, and we're absolutely delighted to bring you this event today in partnership with Robin Hambleton from the University of the West of England and David Sweeting from the University of Bristol, who are co-collaborators in the Bristol Civic Leadership Project. So what we're going to do today is talk about about mayoral leadership and insights from the innovation in urban England. We've got two very distinguished, relatively new on the block, mayors. So Peter Soulsby, Mayor of Leicester, George Ferguson, Mayor of Bristol. They're very brief bios. One of the things that's very noticeable about their biographies is how associated they are with the cities of which they're mayor. So Peter Soulsby was born in Bishop Auckland and educated at the City of Leicester College of Education, and basically then stayed in Leicester, as far as I can see, where he was a teacher, then became a city councillor, then became leader of the council, which he was for 17 years, then opted into Westminster, elected in 2005, but then opted out of Westminster and stood for the mayoral elections in May 2011. George Ferguson is, I think, I'm going to summarise, I've got quite a long bio, is a distinguished architect, thinker about urbanism, planning, etc., etc. And ran, Bristol, of course, was the city that voted to have a mayor when the rest of other English cities were offered the chance and many said no. And he was elected, therefore, in November 2012 as an independent mayor for Bristol. So he's got slightly less experience than Peter Soulsby. But anyway, and he, as an independent, polled 37,000 votes, coming first over the Labour candidate. So we're going to hear from them for about 10 minutes each about their experiences, insights and reflections, having been doing these jobs variously for almost 4 years and almost 2.5 years. Then we're going to throw it open to you for your sort of questions, provocations, comments, their reactions, and I might add in a few of our own, because this is a topic which the Institute has been very interested in, and indeed it's really quite interesting that people sitting in Westminster, the parties in Westminster, generally seem to be much more enthusiastic about mayors than people when they're given the chance. So I think it's quite interesting to see whether politicians in Westminster are getting it a bit wrong or the people out there are getting it a bit wrong. So maybe we'll come to a firmer view when we've heard what our two mayors have to say. So we toss the coin to decide who went first. Peter will serve, and so without further ado, Sir Peter Soulsby.
Oh, well, thank you, Jill, and thank you for inviting us along today. I was coming down the train today from Leicester, and as I was about to get out of the train at St Pancras, somebody I didn't know, elderly man, was obviously down for the day with his wife, turned round to me, and quite out of the blue, he said, "I just want to thank you for everything you're doing for Leicester." Complete stranger. As Jill said, I've been a council leader for 17 years. In those 17 years, nobody ever said that to me. Indeed, in my 6 years as MP, they didn't say it either. But it's a serious point, because although that's not a university-held view in Leicester, at least they know who to thank when they do approve, and they know who to blame when they don't. Indeed, almost as often as I get stopped in the street to be thanked for what I'm doing, I get somebody shouting after me, cursing me for the things that they think I'm doing to bring their precious city to a ruin. Indeed, I passed the Market Tavern last night, and there's a guy outside having a fag, and probably actually, as this is being recorded, I probably won't repeat the particular expletives that he used, but he knew who he was shouting at. I know, because he used my name. That bit I can repeat, but the rest probably not. But as Jill has said, I did 17 years as a council leader, so I do know the difference between the two roles. I also did 6 years as an MP, so I've got some idea as to how effective you can be in that role as against what I'm doing now. And I've joked, not entirely joked, with some of my former MP colleagues that I haven't missed the life in Westminster, and that is indeed true. The difference being that, of course, now I've got a proper job. Some of them laugh. Some of them, I think, actually have considerable sympathy. Because what was very interesting when the cities were having the referenda that led to Bristol alone choosing to go for a mayoral system was how many MPs were actually lining up to position themselves should their city decide to actually go for a mayor. They actually saw it as a job worth doing. Now, the conventional expectation is that a council leader might well want to be an MP. But MPs, to a significant extent, see the mayor as being a real job on behalf of their community. And that's a very big difference. Now, the other fundamental difference, of course, is that a mayor is elected by the people of their city. The council leader is just that. They lead a council. And of course, they too are accountable to their electorate, but it's not the people who are their electorate. I know, as I said, I did it for 17 years. I survived on and off, because I did get kicked out once or twice during that time, but came back and did 17 years in total. So I know how to win it. And you don't win it on the doorstep. You don't win it in the pages of the Leicester Mercury. You win it by getting support from your own political group in secret after the elections have taken place for the people out there in the ballot box. And the accountability is essentially back to your own political group. And that is very different. Very different in the way you perceive the job, inevitably, but much more than that, very different in the way people perceive the role. People expect an elected mayor to provide vision, to help them develop an aspiration for their city, their community, and to deliver on their behalf. And that goes far beyond anything that was ever expected or possible for a council leader. I will have to face the electorate for the first time since my election nearly 4 years ago on May the 7th. As a result of that, I'm intensely aware, as you should be in a democracy, that I need to be sensitive to what they're saying about me out there, what they're thinking about me, and how they'll vote. I think I've got a good record 4 years on, but they'll judge, not me, not council members in private after an election. It'll be the people through the ballot box. And what a mayor is expected to provide is indeed a vision for the future, change in the city, and that was what that chap on the train was thanking me for, because I think looking 4 years on, Leicester is a city that has got a buzz about it that it didn't have. It feels it's going places. Things are happening out in the streets, but actually people are noticing us. I've said of Leicester in the past that it's a city that has perhaps far too long had a collective inferiority complex. Well, I think they've got over it, and I think having a mayor is helping them to get over it. I looked at yesterday's Leicester Mercury. I won't go through every article that mentions the mayor in it, but you get it from the headline, really. The city came to a grinding halt on Wednesday morning, and that was the front page of the Leicester Mercury. So who's to blame? And that's the question to the mayor, not to some faceless council leader, not to some nameless chief executive. That's the question to the mayor. Who's to blame? Now, actually, within there are some pretty positive stories about the mayor as well. There's some pretty negative letters. I have to say, if I judged everything by the letters page of the Leicester Mercury, I would probably be suicidal by lunchtime every day. But that's the difference of having a mayor. They know who to blame. The man on the train knew who to thank, but they also know who to blame and who to expect to learn from what went wrong in the city on Wednesday. Who will actually call the agencies together. The council leader can't call the fire service in, can't call the police in. A mayor can, and is expected to. Is expected to find out between them who is to blame and how we learn from it. And that is a fundamental difference. It is also something that is reflected not just in the drama of that headline, but in the day-to-day of the council's affairs. The scrutiny function in Leicester was pretty moribund 4 years ago when I was elected. Those councillors, they happened, most of them, to be from my own party. have found a new role. And it's questioning me, trying to get answers out of me, and blaming me. And sometimes encouraging me, and sometimes supporting me. But it is new. There is a new vitality to the work and a new relevance to the work of those councillors as there is to the work of the council. Having a mayor in Leicester is important. It has made a real difference. Whole loads of things I've been able to do as mayor that I would never have dared to do. Whole load of risks I've been able to take that I would never have been able to take as a council leader. As a result of that, it's making a difference to Leicester. But behind that, it's not just making a difference to Leicester, it's making a difference to democracy in Leicester. Because now, it's not a faceless council leader, it's a mayor. And they know who to hold to account, and they know who, on May the 7th, they'll have an opportunity to kick out if they don't like the way I'm doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that's quite an interesting contrast between someone who's held elected office as an MP, but also been a council leader. But obviously George Ferguson is in a slightly different position because you're actually an independent mayor of Bristol, which adds an, I think, interestingly new dimension to it as well. So George, would you like to reflect on your 2.5 years of experience so far?
Fine. Well, I cannot tell you how reassuring it is to hear from Peter what his experiences are, both positive and negative. There used to be a famous, we're very good at graffiti in Bristol, and there was a piece of graffiti down in St Paul's that used to say, "Don't vote, whoever you vote for, the council gets in." And that was the sort of general mood in Bristol. And I was actually a councillor in the 70s. I was a child councillor, I was a Liberal when Liberals were Liberals. And I became a councillor not through politics, but absolutely through frustration as an architectural student watching my city being destroyed by highways engineers and what I saw as unnecessary and destructive infrastructure. So I got politicised through community activity, but and I said I would stand for 6 years, and that was a really, really interesting educational experience. It made me realise, after architectural education, that what matters is the experiences of people rather than the photographs of buildings in architectural magazines. So it absolutely defined my architectural career. So it was a 6 years of further education after architecture. But then having said I'd do it for 6 years, having got re-elected once, I stood down, cancelled the local paper, and got on with life. And I thought, I will change the city in other ways, and went off to do that. And when the opportunity came up for Bristol to have a mayor, I thought this is absolutely the answer to the relative political paralysis that we were seeing, or the perception of political paralysis, let's be fair, that we were seeing in Bristol, because some good things were being done. And, but I felt that Bristol should be led and absolutely from Bristol, that strings shouldn't be pulled from London or from Westminster and Whitehall, to be fair, because I have nothing against London in any way. I think Bristol benefits hugely from the success of London, and I trumpet that. But I thought Bristol should not just have a mayor, but have an independent mayor. So there came a point during the campaign for Bristol to have a mayor where there was pretty strong opposition from most of the existing councillors, because I think they rightly saw it as spoiling their game, that I declared early on that if Bristol went for having a mayor, that I would stand. And it was a cheeky thing to do. I called in the editor of the local paper and said, took him up to my flat and gave him a cup of tea, and I said, "I'm going to stand." And he said, yeah, he took it reasonably seriously. And he said, "Are there any skeletons in your cupboard?" And I said, "None none that haven't got flesh on them." And he he actually became quite supportive. I think getting the media on the side for an independent is absolutely vital. I wasn't recognised across the whole of the city. I've always interfered in the city's affairs because as a citizen, through civil society, through various organisations that I might have either set up or contributed to. So recognition was a really, really important issue, and I couldn't go around delivering leaflets to 310,000 doors or whatever it is in Bristol. So I had to do things in other ways. So was the expectation the same? In many ways, my expectation was so open that I've not been surprised by anything except for some of the viciousness of the opposition. Some of the opposition, and I'm not just talking about the politicians, although there are one or two within the City Council who are unbelievably vicious, while most of them are very civilised. There is an incredible, you've got to have a thick skin. And I haven't really got a thick skin, but I've found a way of dealing with that through belief in what I'm doing is right, and through having a very good support system I may be the leader of a party of one, so I've only got to stab myself in the back, but I do have a very good support system of those who gathered around me to help get me elected and who continued support. So I think belief in what you're doing is right is absolutely vital in these circumstances. I didn't have what you'd call a manifesto. I had what was a vision for Bristol. I made very few promises. And I think that because I saw those as hostages to fortune, and manifestos are documents to break, really. And, but nevertheless, I made one or two promises because I was absolutely determined to deliver. I didn't think Bristol had been delivering. And so I said, we will deliver a 12,000-seater arena for Bristol. We are we've been described as the last frontier of a city without a major venue of that sort. We will deal with the transport issue, which is, clogged up. Bristol is quite a frequent headline in our papers as well. We will deliver European Green Capital, which we've been trying for some time. And we will use the fact that we've got a mayor to make these things happen, because I refuse to take no for an answer, and we will demonstrate that we have somebody in office who is guaranteed to be in office for at least, actually it's 3.5 years because I come up in May 2016. Everything I've done has been on a 2020 timeline, in that you can't change a city around in 3.5 or 4 years. You can start it, but you need that 8-year period, I think, really to make the difference. And I would give a quote happily to Peter that he needs that further 4 years to carry on the good story in Leicester. And it is a good story. Interestingly, Sir Peter Soulsby, who is the chair of the Arts Council, said to me the other day, I've just realised there are 3 cities outside London that really stand out to me in terms of their backing of the arts. And they're Leicester and Liverpool and Bristol. And what is the common factor? They're the 3 senior cities outside London that have elected mayors. And I know, it's absolutely transformed Joe's life in Liverpool as well. And he says exactly what Peter would say in terms of recognition, in terms of people knowing that he is to blame. And when I went to, I travel a lot, and I get away with it. I am absolutely upfront about it. I say that part of my job, I'm not mayor of the city council, I'm mayor of the city, and what's more, when I'm abroad, I'm representing the city region. That sometimes frightens some of the surrounding authorities, but actually I'm there to sell Bristol, Bath, Gloucester and North Somerset when I'm abroad, as much as I am to sell Bristol itself. And when I go to the European Commission and say we want to be green capital, as I was able to do about 9 months after I was elected, for the 3rd time of trying, I know what helped make a difference was that I am passionate about this. It's absolutely in line with my beliefs. And what's more, I will be there to deliver it. And we will do it with a sense of fun. And the other thing I'm unashamed about is that we try and do everything in Bristol with a sense of fun. So if we close roads. We don't see closing roads as a negative. We're opening streets, and we're opening them to people to enjoy themselves. And I think because I'm not on a political career path, I've got nowhere to go beyond this job. I have absolutely no desire to go anywhere beyond this job, but I won't die unhappy if I don't get re-elected, because I have plenty of other things to do. Enables me, I think, to take a few risks. I've had the tanks out on the street. I've had a tank out on the streets against my residents' parking plans. Bristol is amazing at thinking that they're the only place in the world that's having these things imposed on them sometimes. And we have been a bit behindhand, and I'm always looking to the support of other cities to demonstrate that change can be good. Because the other thing I've discovered as being new to this job is that change, until you've done it, is generally by adults, not by children, judged out of fear rather than out of hope. And every help I can get to demonstrate that that change is positive is extremely supportive to my position. And using Leicester, Liverpool, Barcelona, Bordeaux, or wherever it may be, is the way of persuading that change, and also experimenting. So we have built up wonderfully positive partnerships with all the other public authorities and with our universities in particular. So it's really quite fitting that both universities are here, because I see them as very much part of the governance of the city, and they are the reason I first came to Bristol.
Excellent. There's two rather persuasive pictures of the case for mayors. So let's open it up and have some questions. I'm going to give Robin first. Okay. Robin, you need to wait for the microphone. If anyone's in the innovation room and wants to come in, there are 1 or 2 spaces in here. So Robin. Okay,
so my name's Robin Hambleton. I'm a professor at the University of the West of England. Could I just say ever so quickly, we have got some research going on Leicester. Professor Colin Copus is here, is studying the impact of the mayoral model in your city, Peter. And we're doing it in Bristol with the support of the mayor. There are some leaflets on the table outside if people wanted to look at some of the analysis. Can I thank you both for some very open contributions this morning? I think the emotion comes through quite clearly from both of you, which is really good to see. I've got a tough question, though, because I know you don't like it to be easy. Is there a risk that the mayoral model centralises power too much? And can you say something about what you'd like to do in the neighbourhoods in your cities? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, whichever.
I'll kick off with that just simply because I was talking about it yesterday morning with our voluntary sector. I think there is a deal to be done. Recently, the core cities leaders all signed a Charter for Local Freedom in Glasgow when we had a devolution debate. And devolution is obviously very big on the agenda, and you know, when I'm asking what improvements we could have, and that is that we have a much more autonomous, city regions. But I think the deal is that we do devolve power then within the city as much as we possibly can, that all non-strategic decisions go down to the lowest possible. We've got 14 neighbourhood partnerships. I had thought that we might reduce the number. I think actually it would be too unsettling because they don't work as well as they might, or they're very patchy. What I'm absolutely determined to do is strengthen that network of neighbourhood partnerships, which should be that should be led to a large extent by the 4 or 6 councillors represent the 2 or 3 wards within each neighbourhood partnership, because they're the democratic representatives. That gives them more of a job to do, gives them, I think, a stronger case for coming to the mayor for demanding local provision for whatever it may be, builds up a case for a certain amount of fiscal and administrative devolution to the neighbourhood partnerships. But absolutely, I think that is part of the deal. Whitehall, Westminster, make sure that we have much more governance, local governance, or local control, but that but we spread that down to our neighbourhoods and communities.
So Peter, is that the same in Leicester? Or?
I think it is. I think obviously there are those who would argue, and they probably argue it in Bristol as well, that the mayor's got far too much power and isn't accountable to anybody. The reality of that is not indeed the case. We have to face the electorate. I'm due to face them on May the 7th, and if they don't like the way we've used the power, they will be the ones, under the mayoral system, will have the opportunity to vote us out. But as I was saying earlier on, there are lots of checks and balances in the system. We have to go to the councils with our budgets. We have to face scrutiny. And as I say, certainly in Leicester, it has been given a purpose with a mayoral system that it never had beforehand. Before the mayoral system, it was just what those councillors who weren't part of the executive filled their time with. Now it is something rather more purposeful, and is actually becoming increasingly effective, both at scrutinising and at policy development. And when it comes to neighbourhoods, I think it's important to both of us to be constantly reminded we're not the only elected representatives in our cities. I've got 54 councillors. They'll be actually facing the electorate on the same day as I am in Leicester, and they are pretty effective. And I've done my best to make sure, as indeed George has, that at a neighbourhood level they're enabled to take real decisions about real resources that make a real difference to the people who elected them.
Okay, we've got some more questions coming here. So over here. And we might just, we haven't got that much time, so a lot of questions. So let's take a group. So, yeah.
Richard Vise, likewise, thought they're brilliant contributions, so thank you. And in terms of Leicester's sense of identity, of course, we've got Richard III's reinterment coming out, which is going to be fabulous. I just slightly still challenging about this issue of the role of the other councillors. I'm a bit more familiar with what happens in City Hall in London, and it doesn't seem to give scrutiny, it doesn't seem to give councillors a purpose. It seems to give them high blood pressure and a sense of frustration. And I just wondered, how do you translate that from just sort of bashing heads against what the mayor wants to do to actually a real sense of empowerment?
Yeah, let's go here. No, get the mic back. Just do a couple. So we'll do this row. So you and then that. Yes.
Thank you. Chris Hobson, Head of Policy at East Midlands Chamber and Leicester City resident. George touched on it when he was talking. It'd be interesting to maybe expand the issue of the relationship between those areas of a mayor and the surrounding areas. So obviously George said that you're there and you're championing the region. Bristol's obviously the biggest player there. I think it might feel slightly different in the East Midlands, where we're polycentric, and I imagine it might feel different again up in Liverpool, where they've got Manchester half an hour down the road that currently, at least for the next couple of years, doesn't have a mayor. So just to expand on how those areas with mayors interact with the surrounding districts.
Okay, and next to you.
Tom Aldridge. Relatively few cities have moved to the mayoral model, either through popular vote or through councils taking the freedoms to do that. If the next government came in and wanted to encourage the great example that you're setting, what would be the best single thing they could do to encourage it, and probably the single worst thing they could do to discourage it?
Okay, let's take maybe group the sort of Richard's comment, the comment here from Chris. So I think it's quite interesting that, in a sense, the way you got mayors accepted was to sort of graft them on with minimal disturbance to other arrangements. A bit unlike London, where Mrs. Thatcher conveniently created a complete void at Greater London level. And I just wondered, how that was playing out both on the other councils. 54 is still quite a lot of other councillors, I would have thought. But anyway.
Yes.
And then this issue about boundaries, which is also quite interesting. Used to be, I remember doing some work with Bristol on the Green Capital, where they were madly frustrated that Bristol was on the wrong boundaries and needed to be able to take over its hinterland or whatever. So, anyway.
I forgot to mention the pile of bones in the car park. They have actually obviously given me tremendous opportunity as mayor to talk about, I was talking about the pride and self-competence of the city. It's an opportunity for me to remind Leicester that it's got 2,000 years of history, and that's one of the important chapters in it. And when we reinter him, I will be using that opportunity. We've got, I think, 170 different media organisations booked in for Leicester for that. You couldn't pay for that. It has been suggested that I actually buried the bones there myself, although actually I was on record at the time as saying that the only bones they were likely to find would be in a Kentucky Fried Chicken box, which I came to regret. Anyway, but to be serious, talking about the London model of mayor, is different. Very different. Got London boroughs for a start, you know, and of course, you know, the creation of that mayoralty was filling a different need, I think, from the one that we fill in our cities. It is undoubtedly the case in Leicester, as I've said a couple of times now, that the role councils are playing in scrutinising the mayoral form of governance is much more vigorous and much more effective than it ever was in the system where the leadership of the council and the chairing of the scrutiny commissions was all part of the, frankly, the divvying up that was done, you know, between by a controlling group. This is a very different. The separation, even though actually it happens, you know, we have to have the same political affiliation for the most part, is very much more healthy and very much more effective. As to the issue about the surrounding areas, I don't know quite to what extent it affects Bristol. I would guess it's very similar. We have boundaries in Leicester that were drawn in the 1920s, and they don't make a lot of sense in the 21st century. They really don't. And for us, it's also very different from the metropolitan areas such as Manchester, you know, where you've got metropolitan districts, or former, you know, around. We've got actually a two-tier system around us, with a county and non-met districts. And there is a degree of dysfunctionality about that I think, you know, a government will need to address at some time. Although you can imagine, while the people outside of Leicester are very happy to write into the Leicester Maker and complain about the mayor, they're not anxious to be actually part of the electorate.
Councillors, I've got 70 councillors in Bristol City Council. There was one independent who has now yesterday gone over to the Tories. So I haven't got a lot of natural allies on the council. On the other hand, I've put together a really brilliant, excellent, cohesive cabinet of 5 from 4 different political parties. It was a struggle to begin with. The Labour Party, interestingly, refused to come on my cabinet to begin with. They were a bit miffed. And I did do the dirty trick of leaving a couple of empty chairs at the first cabinet meeting, and the BBC are learning off me. And it worked, and eventually they did. I think it was a central instruction which only fell into my hands, really, because I'd said, you know, if you elect a party mayor, which I know is not true in Peter's case, but if you elect a party mayor, the strings will be pulled from Westminster. And it sort of demonstrated. Anyway, since getting my cabinet together, it's been great. I've got 2 Labour members, 1 Tory, one Lib Dem and 1 Green. And I couldn't do the job without them, because I have sort of given the impression I do this on my own. And absolutely I couldn't do the job without them. I really value them. And interestingly, the leader of one of the political parties keeps trying to downgrade them and reduce their allowances because I take all the decisions. I only take all the decisions with their help and support. And so I think that you know, that does speak well for having an independent mayor. I'm not going to stand against Peter. But every place has its own way of doing things. So scrutiny, I did make the mistake early on of declaring scrutiny as some sort of medieval process that the mayor has to go through. And now I've got a lot of time for scrutiny. I think scrutiny has now turned into a much more positive policy-making process. There is one chair of one scrutiny commission who has a mission to bring me down, but generally they are excellent, and the overall scrutiny commission is chaired by one of the Labour members who's really good. I treat him as the other leader of a political group, so when we have meetings of all the political leaders together with the chair of the overall scrutiny commission. And so I think, I mean, the budget is a deal, you know. I mean, I've been running down corridors. It's been really West Wing trying to do deals at the end of the budget, but I've got them through twice. I've got them through twice now. Or was it 3 times? And I've got thereabouts as I wanted it to be. But it's right that councillors should have a contribution to that. The regional thing is interesting. I mean, I always say that politicians see boundaries, but people don't. Some people do, but you know, if you've got a swimming pool one side of a boundary, you're going to use the swimming pool. Doesn't matter whether you're on which side of the boundary you are. You know, I mean, people don't see boundaries generally, and people will claim to live in Bristol who don't live in Bristol. So I do think that we need a much more joined up approach, and we're having a really constructive conversation with the three surrounding authorities, which do make a very sensible, we call it Cuba, the county that used to be Avon, and it is a reasonably, it's a sensible boundary for the city region. So it is a sensible base for us to go to government with a combined authority saying that we now deserve a devolution deal. So I think that answers most of the... what would I do to encourage mayors?
No, I was going to come on to the Tom's...
okay.
I'm actually just interested in one point, Peter. You're facing an election and you've got people running for Labour, for the council, and you running for mayor. Do you run on a joint manifesto, or do you have a different mayoral vision from the one that your councillors are running on?
We're negotiating that at the minute. It is technically possible for me to have a different manifesto. Yeah. I hope that they will agree to the one that I would want to run on.
Okay, now Tom's asked this interesting question, because obviously governments didn't do a very good selling job on it last time. People seem to be missing out from what you've said, so what would you advise an incoming government also committed to the spread of mayors to do?
Reward cities with mayors
who are
doing the right job. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they've lived up to that promise enough. There are occasional good deals. I'm absolutely sure Bristol has benefited. When we won European Green Capital, I went straight to Cameron and asked him for support, and he gave it. And I think that we get greater access to government and to secretaries of state. I think government needs help to make sure that cities who don't have mayors realise that. Now, there are exceptions. I think anybody looks to the example of Manchester. I don't think I would have been surprised if Manchester had gone for a mayor at the time of that general round of referenda, because it is perceived that Manchester has successful governance, and it's down to Howard and Richard and his predecessor. I think, but now Manchester is going to have a different form of governance, which is the Metro Mayor, which is interesting.
But isn't that a bit anti-democratic? I mean, if the people really don't want a mayor, and government is basically turning the screws and saying, you could get all this, you get all this, because it's a bit of a zero-sum game if government's slicing up a relatively limited pot.
I mean, I think now that we have some of the larger cities with mayors, there is more for the government to point to in terms of the success of those cities and the accountability of the people who are doing it. During those the referenda campaigns, there was a lot of you're going to be electing a dictator, your city will be wrecked within 4 years. That sort of stuff was put around. Well, now I think it is possible, I think, to put up some good examples of cities that actually have benefited from having mayors, and some examples of, I hope people will see it as having been led to having a vision for the future and a confidence for the future that wouldn't otherwise have had.
And what would make you wince if the next government does? I mean, Tom's other question was, what should government not do? Which is probably more important advice than what it should do. So what would set the cause of mayors back by a central government? Or is it an unstoppable force?
Well, I don't think it is unstoppable. I mean, I think the principal reason why cities didn't go for mayors, well, two principal reasons. One, in the areas where they perceived there was good governance, why bother to change it? The other is, generally, the councillors are against having mayors, and they led the debate, and they have the leaflets, they've got the party organisations, and so I was up against it. I had a lot of opposition. I mean, there was a lot of opposition to Bristol having a mayor. So you had to do something extraordinary to persuade Bristol that it needed one, but I think we were in the best possible position because we had a perception of the worst possible governance.
Okay, just quickly, Peter, should the government bother to ask? I mean, is it sensible to, if this is clearly a good governance reform, should the government, have a referendum, or should it basically have a referendum after you've had a bit of experience?
I think having established the precedent of having a referendum, yes, I think they can only go back and ask again at some appropriate time. I regret that they didn't put more effort into actually persuading people the last time round.
Okay, let's go to more questions. We've got one in the front, and then a couple at the... Well, they're sprouting everywhere. Yes, please.
Tim Bradley, thank you for an interesting talk. Do you think that having a more proportionate voting system for councillors, electoral reform would help? And if so, how would you go about introducing that across England? Because I think it's developing in other devolved nations.
Do you want to do that very quickly, and then we'll move to the one?
I actually do think that, and I think that my members of my own party back in Leicester aren't going to thank me for saying this, particularly when we have 52 out of the 54 seats. Yeah. But actually, I don't think that that's particularly reflective of the city, and I don't think it's particularly healthy. And I would prefer a much more proportional system.
George,
and absolutely, yeah. And Richard Lees in Manchester says, it's difficult having so much, such large single-party representation. Yes, I totally agree with you. I think our councils don't. Well, certainly in Bristol, our council doesn't look like the general population. And I think if we have a more proportional system, we will have a much better balance. What's really interesting is that the youth council does have a proportionate election. They got 10,000 voters across the schools, and they produce a council that is more diverse than Bristol. Yeah. And that gives me great hope.
Okay, so we're going to go to the back of the room, where hands are going up like...
Thank you. My name is David Melville. I work for an international technology company based here in London, and I'm interested in your views as civic leaders for how you regard your responsibility to promote civic participation. We're doing a lot of work, for example, in the US, and I really appreciated the point you made, George, about civic participation being made fun. Technology's got an enormous amount to offer here, and I'm wondering about the Core Cities Group, whether you're starting to think about, for example, developing a common platform for citizen engagement and citizen participation, and how you view the opportunities and sometimes also perhaps the threats that technology presents in that area.
Okay, let's take another couple. We've got there.
Hi, Rob Smith. I wanted to ask whether there's any particular reform or change in your powers or your responsibilities or your procedures that you think would make you more effective as elected mayors? And is there any change you'd like to see in Whitehall that would make you more effective as elected mayors? Thank you.
Okay, so Rob's a long-standing senior civil servant. Just a bit of context there, so he's probably experienced the Whitehall end. Yes, just a question there.
Bob Colnut, Northampton. I see that in the Bristol policy report, it suggests that the deprived areas of Bristol seem to have responded less well to the whole process, or feel that they've benefited less. And I just wonder what the views are from the both cities about whether a mayor can make a difference to the question of deprivation.
Okay, well, that's quite a varied set of questions. So why don't we start with Peter? Do you want to start?
Right. A mayor can make a difference to areas beyond the city centre, and frankly, if they don't, they're actually missing the opportunity to connect with their electorate, because it won't just be the people who are in the core of the city who will be voting for them. It will, for the most part, be people who are elsewhere out in those communities, and addressing the very real levels of deprivation in some of those communities is part of what you've got to be seen to be connecting with. So we've had a child poverty initiative that I've actually significant to my deputy mayor been engaged in, but there's a whole range of other things beyond that we need to be seen to be tackling and recognising. Talking about the issues where I feel as mayor of Leicester, certainly over these first 4 years, I have been most frustrated by not having adequate powers. Transport. actually has got to come right at the top of the list. I go out and do meet the mayor events on a frequent occasion, sometimes city centre, sometimes out in the communities, and I can be sure that the buses will come up. Why can't you do something about our bus service? And of course I can't. I mean, you know what? I mean, you know what? Most of you here will know what powers I have got, but mostly it's being able, if only I had it, to throw some money at it. But actually, I haven't got any of the powers beyond that, and that is top of the list. The other one, actually, and it's reflected in that headline I was showing you earlier on, is matters to do with the police. We've got a police and crime commissioner. I've got a meeting on Monday. I was talking about getting people together. He says it's a purely operational matter, and he doesn't need to come along. And for a mayor, that is very frustrating indeed, because certainly a city that grinds to a halt for 4 hours isn't a purely operational matter. Well, you can imagine I'm saying a few things publicly about that at the moment.
And George?
First question about the technical opportunities and I think what we might describe as e-democracy and measuring the mood of the city. We've just launched a great program with the University of Bristol. It's a 50-50 joint venture using their supercomputer, using the fact that we've got 100 miles of ducting across the city that we bought off rediffusion before I came in, that some bright officer saw the opportunity. And we are going to use that for all sorts of ways of connecting with the city, both in terms of saving infrastructure by making sure we're intelligent about people coming into the city and where they can park and all that sort of thing, down to measuring the health of different areas, and which comes actually onto the issue of deprived areas. I don't think we've done a good enough job, clearly, in telling people what is happening. I mean, we're being asked by government to pick up an awful lot of the problems of austerity. I mean, nearly all of them, as far as I can see, at local authorities. And I've taken that really seriously. I've made sure that we have replaced the council tax reduction scheme that, for instance, that they dumped on us. That's cost me £4 million a year. I've made quite sure that we're picking up the independent living fund. You know, all those things that impact on local people's lives. And I also inherited some difficult decisions on youth clubs and issues. So there are things that were in the train of being closed when I came in. So the perception sometimes is that life hasn't improved for them. And I think we could all understand why. And I keep telling my office, get me out there as much as possible, because actually I enjoy being in the most challenged areas and dealing with those issues. So I think it's probably a pattern you would get in any city, but it's something I take extremely seriously. We've introduced the living wage. We can't do it across the whole city, but we have the same problem with the buses. Yes, I am to a certain extent perceived to be the mayor of the centre, and that is something that needs dealing with.
How's your power grab here, George? What would you like to grab power on?
Well, I think devolution, this whole devolution debate is the absolute answer to it. If we could have a proper integrated transport authority system, whatever you call it, that gives us the equivalent of London's Transport for London, that would be, across the 4 authorities, that would be absolutely brilliant. It's power I would share with those authorities. And the same applies to health, it applies to skills. We know where the issues lie. We're much closer to the solutions. So I think it's trusting us. I think the best thing you can do for the mayoral system is reward the mayoral system, and not reward the mayoral system, reward the success of the city as a result of the mayoral system with giving the city more responsibility, more opportunity to mess up themselves, rather than us always having to beg from Westminster and Whitehall.
Okay, let's do a final round of questions. So, my God, we'll try and take everybody, and then I'll leave it to Peter and George to do it. So let's move rapid things. So if you could keep your questions relatively short, go there, and then just behind Kerry. Yeah. So
okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's Barry Loveday, Portsmouth University. The issue of PCCs was raised by one of the speakers already. I wonder what you would think about taking on responsibility for local policing. I detected some concern about the spread of operational matters, which means that no one seems to be able to intervene, not even a PCC, when clearly he should be. What's your position on that?
Okay, we'll park that one. We're going to collect all these issues. So, yes.
Bob Chilton. The model could prove to be one which, when it's good, it's very, very good. But when it's bad, could be absolutely awful. And you only have to look in international examples of mayors being removed, impeached, etc. After the novelty's gone, corruption sets in. Do you feel the systems we've got are adequate in respect of current codes of conduct, the oversight of those codes of conduct, possibility of recall, etc.?
Okay, that's very good quick question. Here. Oh, yeah.
Hi. Andy Collins from John Lewis Partnership. Really building on that is the professionalisation of the local administration. You look at Manchester, and the leader and the CEO have both got 20 plus years experience of running that organisation. If you've got billions of pounds more coming in city devolution, what's the skill set? Thank you.
Okay, and we've got another couple. Coming in thick and fast, yes?
Simon Judge, Department for Education. My impression, which may be unfair, is that you're largely focusing on improving public services and bringing them together. I haven't heard an awful lot about promoting economic regeneration. Is that a fair observation, and is that how you spend your time?
Not that bringing public services together isn't sort of quite an important challenge in itself, but yes.
Paul Nysaric, a council officer. How's it going with the officers?
Okay. And I'm going to add a question, which is, does anyone want to be a councillor anymore? So, having heard all about these, so that gives you quite a sort of interesting little run round, sort of future challenges and developments. Peter,
actually, people do still want to be councillors, and you know they're putting themselves forward for all parties for an election, which happens to be on the same day as me. So you know they do feel there is a job to be done. And actually, I do note that the general calibre of people putting themselves forward is, it's not bad. Not bad at all. There's going to be some good people there. Few issues just to pick them up. Police and Crime Commissioner and the role of the Mayor in relation to that. I'm not quite sure what Police and Crime Commissioners are supposed to do. I do have some serious issues about what ours has done, and I know that there are similar questions being asked elsewhere. Comes back to some of the issues and discussion that perhaps is longer than we have time for today, about boundaries, about joint authorities, because of course our Police and Crime Commissioner is Leicestershire and Rutland, with the city in the middle of it. So, you know, there are issues there about how you do it. But certainly, I look with envy at the powers that the Mayor of London has got with regard to police and with regard to public transport. And I think those, those are the two areas I would immediately pick out as the ones where I feel I don't have the responsibility for what I actually, need to be able to deliver on, and people expect me to be able to deliver on. Talked about, mayors being absolutely awful. Well, actually, local governance can be absolutely awful with lots of different models. The thing about having a mayor is, you know who is being absolutely awful, and you can either change them or at least expose them. In a way that is often very difficult if you have absolutely awful local governance that is anonymous. At least you know who to kick. And of course, we've talked about public services quite significantly in things today, but actually the promotion of economic regeneration and investment in our areas is an important part of what a mayor can do that I could never do as a council leader. Very recently, IBM were looking for somewhere to set up. They were looking across the UK. They're very familiar with a mayoral form of governance. Gave me an enormous advantage in talking with them, in getting a package together, in bringing them to Leicester. And they're coming to Leicester. And that, I'm absolutely convinced, is down to the fact that the mayoral system was able to deliver for them and they knew what they were working with. We've got Hastings Direct moving into Leicester. Again, something that I was fronting the discussions with them. I was getting the package together. They could talk to the mayor delivered. So yeah, of course it's about public services, but it's also about actually the economy of the city and particularly getting investment into the city.
And what about this point about whether if billions more come to local government, is local government really up to that. There were some concerns. We had a round table about decentralising welfare, and some of the sort of welfare charities were particularly worried that was there going to be a big capacity gap that would mean sort of vulnerable people would suffer because actually local governments maybe getting more quickly than it could adapt and skill up for.
I would again argue that if you've got a mayoral form of governance, you can deliver. You can make change. You can deal with the new challenges. Actually, can I just come back on just one point? I was asked about what about the officers?
Yeah.
I have to say, I made the chief executive redundant at the end of the first week. And have had excellent working relationships and got really good support from the team of people who've got there now. You'd have to ask them, you know, what they think about the change, but I think they find it exciting working in a mayoral authority. We've certainly got some really good applicants for the new jobs that have been created.
Okay, George.
Well, I'll start with that one. Read Robin and David's report. But the feedback I get from officers is excellent. I had an interim chief executive, which was a huge opportunity. They were virtually all interim senior management team. I've always thought the secret of life is to get the right managers. And so I had a virtual clean sweep, changed the structure, got a city director in who's not exactly a chief executive because I see it as a joint job. And we run the city as a partnership with 4 strategic directors. And we have broken down all the silos. We work in the same room and with our support staff, and the communication right across the whole of the area is absolutely brilliant. And so I've absolutely no doubt we've got the structure that can cope with a hell of a lot more than we currently deal with. John Lewis, I'm sure, would have a lot to teach us on that. We also work very closely with the LEP. We have an excellent chair of the LEP that I work very closely with, and so do the other leaders. In terms of economic region, I'm batting for Bristol all the time, and I have exactly the same experience as Peter does, is that people come to me. I've had people saying they've had terrible frustration in trying to, you know, they want to come and invest in Bristol, and who can they talk to? I said, well, you know, the answer is yes, what you want. As long as you do it well, we're up for it. And I think that attitude that you can get from a mayor, and you can get it directly, and you can get it with some confidence that you're able to deliver is magic. And that's, you know, Bristol is better known across the world as a result over the last 2 years. And I get that feedback from the States, I get it from China. You know, it is better known, and you don't invest in places that you don't know. We don't have very good football teams, so we have to do it rather differently, although they're just doing a lot better now. But yeah, I think all those things are important. We have got councillors calling for a recall system because we don't have a recall system amongst the in the bunch of mayors that were going to come in at the time I came in, which was a bunch of 1 in the end. There is no recall system. I'd be perfectly happy with a recall system, but currently we don't have it. I have a really good relationship with our PCC, but I do think that we ought to look at bringing police authorities as city regional authorities. We have a very odd boundary for our police authority.
So I'm really sorry we're going to have to draw it to a close there, but I think that's clearly provoked huge amounts of interest, judged by the amount of comments from the chair, from the audience. So without further ado, could I thank our partners at the University of West of England, Bristol, for helping facilitate this event. Could I particularly thank Peter Soulsby and George Ferguson for coming up from Leicester and Bristol respectively to share their insights. And I know some people are attending a round table downstairs. You'll be guided to where you're going. Other people, please feel free to hang out and network. Hopefully there may still be coffee there. Anyway, but it's been great. So could you thank our panel? We hope to see you all at the Institute for Government again soon. Thank you very much for coming.